Hello and a very warm welcome to the brand new edition of To The Point. I'm Kriti Mishra. And on today's edition, my guest is Housing and Urban Affairs and Civil Aviation Minister, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. Mr. Puri, welcome to Rajya Sabha Television and thank you so much for joining us. So talking about Central Vista, you're executing this ambitious project. The Supreme Court has also given a go-ahead, saying that there were no infirmities as far as change of land use was concerned or grant of approval. Why do we need Central Vista?
Well, first of all, let's start with the new Parliament building. The current building is 93 years old. The conceptualization and design of that building never envisaged that it would become the home for the legislature of a newly independent country. If you study British Indian history and the construction of this building, the dates you know, at that stage the colonial power had no intent whatsoever of handing over power or being made to hand over power. If you remember, even the father of the nation who successfully galvanized an elitist lawyers movement into a mass movement through linked with the peasantry, that started after 1919, 1920. All right, so when this building was conceived, you didn't have independent India on the horizon. Number two, a building of parliament in the world's largest democracy, which, if I may submit to you, madam, is also one of the world's, perhaps the world's oldest democracies. There were republics in India in 300 BC, according to Megasthenes, who was a Greek traveler, and he recorded this in Indica. You don't build governance or architecture for governance for today and tomorrow. You build this kind of architecture for the next 200 years. So ideally, if those who were responsible for decision making in 1947, when we became an independent country, if those people had assumed their responsibility, they would have started thinking in terms of a new Central Vista or certainly a new parliament building when we became an independent country, which was 47 onwards. Now there have been repeated calls for building a parliament which befits India's heritage, India's genius and India's potential. Now there are three broad categories, and I'm sorry I'm giving you a long-winded answer, why you need a new parliament. One is the sheer physical necessity of having a parliament which is capable of accommodating the strength that you will have in parliament. There is a freeze in place just now because of delimitation. That freeze gets limited, I think, in 2025, when the number of members of the Lok Sabha will go up from the current 540 something to 750 or 800. Okay, now you don't have space for them. Secondly, the state of the building. A building constructed 100 years earlier, all right, has through a series of factors. One is when you have a civil structure designed for a purpose and then you keep adding to it, you're placing strain on it through new air conditioning system, additional seating, having seating behind the pillars to accommodate more people. As long back as in 1985, the Estimates Committee talked about the maintenance of this building. So this has been around. I am not referring you to the immediate need which was flagged by the two presiding officers of the two houses, the Honorable Speaker of the Lok Sabha and the presiding officer of the Honorable Vice President in the Rajya Sabha, where he took the sense of the House, made a request to the government that we need a new parliament. That is now. Recent history. I want to take you back to 2012. One of the members of parliament from the Congress party gave an interview to the Hindu newspaper where he categorically says that the current parliament building is inadequate. Inadequate is a very clear term and it is not functional. So surely you need, for the world's largest democracy, you need a place which is functional. The same sense, madam, was also conveyed by the officer on special duty to the Honorable Speaker, Srimati Meera Kumarji, in 2012 in a communication to the Secretary of the Urban Development Ministry. So I'm taking you back to 93 years old building. It was never designed to be the legislature of an independent country. In 85, the estimates committee was talking about problems of maintenance. In 2012, the Congress party's speaker had made a request for a new building, and then coming in 2019. So it should have been undertaken much earlier. Most countries which became independent worked out their new office governance buildings, parliaments within 20, 25, 40, 50 years. We've taken a little longer. But I think full marks, full credit to a Prime Minister who saw the challenge, had applied his minds many years ago to what needed to be done, and he has the political bandwidth and the commitment to execute the project. So I'm very happy that we've got the green signal from the Apex Court, the Honorable Supreme Court, and it will be the endeavor of my ministry to have this project completed so that the celebrations for the 75th anniversary of our independence can be conducted in this building, new building, in 2022.
So we are talking about very strict timeline. Given this exogenous shock, given the uncertainty, how will you ensure that this timeline is met?
I like the words you use. You said strict timeline. I think it's also a tight timeline. You see, yeah. But can it be done or can it not be done? As the line minister, I would say it can be done. When we conceptualize, I mean, it's been in the Prime Minister's mind. One of the things I inherited in my ministry, nobody told me where they came from, but I know where they came from. All the literature on all the central vistas and all over the world, and so it's been in people. There was an informal committee which has been working on it for 3 or 4 years. Very senior people had applied their minds. But there comes a time when you start to unveil this. I'm very clear that when the idea initially took shape, it was in the Prime Minister's mind and he started consulting people. He must have thought that it's only when the second term the government comes back, 2014, because it took time to develop. So you don't want to undertake a huge project at a time when, you haven't thought it through, etc. So we had an international open design competition. It's open to, design consultants all over the world. Very good results. Some of the best names in India participated. Then we appointed a jury which had all the prominent names, the chairman of the Delhi Urban Arts Commission and others, to go into those designs to make an evaluation. And based on that, then bids were called. Based on the, and somebody very eminent got it. Then the individual projects are being tendered. Now, the company which has been awarded this time is not only aware of the strict or tight timelines, but they have also demonstrated, and the government agencies which have been entrusted the task of supervising and ensuring that the work is done in a time frame have satisfied themselves. I must confess, I was a little worried when the Honorable Supreme Court said, go ahead, but don't commence work till we come. And a few days, but I want to assure you, during that time, all the other work to be done outside, all be ready. I am convinced that the timeline is for the ceremony to take place in October 2022. I think it will be done well before August of 2022.
That sounds really inspiring. But sir, we saw criticism also from few quarters. Many called it a misplaced priority. How do you refute all those charges?
If I were left to myself, I would say that some of this kind of criticism should not even be dignified with a response. If you said something in the year 1985, if you said something in 2012, and then you go and say the opposite in 2020 when you are actually somebody else is doing it, which thing, from my mind, I think they need to seriously introspect, because doublespeak is too mild a term. I think there is something more serious involved here. And I hope I'm forgiven to saying this, that the real problem is not the central vista. The real problem is that all these major initiatives, rolling out a vaccine which every Indian can access, producing a new governance structure in terms of architecture, buildings, which is a project for posterity. 150, 200, 250 years this is going to be. I give you a small piece of perspective. You know, we are a 7,000-year-old civilization. Our existence as a republic is only for 75 years, in 2022, 73 years now. That's only 1% of our period. Surely, any democratically elected government should take great pride to say that the new Central Vista will be built by a democratically elected government using Indian talent, using Indian material to showcase India to the world as the largest democracy. Surely you should take pride in that. But some quarters, as you call them, and since you are not naming them, I won't either. Let me tell you, they have a problem. They find fault with a vaccine or the fact that the first two vaccines are produced in India. They were earlier found fault with acts of valor by our security forces. So I think they themselves don't take this very seriously, let me tell you. They've got a problem. They've got internal problems within the party. They're having a difficult time to determine whether, whether exclusive family control is compatible with a democratic party and its functioning. Those are separate issues. It's not for me to comment on them. But I don't think this criticism is serious. I know that over the last few days, an attempt was made to pass snide remarks, take a jibe. But I see the overall mood in the country, the manner in which this has been welcomed. One of the points which has been made is that maybe the stakeholder consultations was not wide enough. I take that on board. I have decided as a result of this suggestion that all the stakeholder consultations that we've done, no matter whom we've spoken to, everything will be put in the public domain because it's all videographed. It's all. I mean, if I speak to an audience of 200 people or Mr. Bimal Patel or my secretary speaks to him, it's all recorded. We put it in the public domain. And you might be in for a surprise. A lot of people have a view on public consultations or being consulted as meaning that unless their view is adopted, they will have a veto on it. Now, that's not the purpose of public consultation. And by the way, we're going to have a website pretty soon, which will have all the details on the project and where people can make suggestions, etc. We have consulted both the presiding officers. The demand came from them. Yes. We have consulted all the other stakeholders. We have gone around, even on little things. If a statue has to be moved from place A to B, we have gone and consulted the family members. We've got their express consent. So it's a very, very remarkably comprehensive exercise. And I'm sure that this is the first of the components, the parliament. Then we will be building the office blocks and others. It's going to be a busy period for the coming years. But I just want to remind you that 70% of the India of 2030 is still to be built. Delhi has or will have probably 2 crore residents when the next census comes, and 1 crore 30 lakh of those residents of Delhi will be given new places in terms of either jahan juggi wahi makan or the regularization of unauthorized colonies through Malkana Haq or land pooling, new tenements. So this is a project for posterity in every respect. It will be there for another 100, 200 years. But more than that, it's also a lot of economic activity which will also help us to come out of the current trough. And all the signs are very strong about the recovery. But this construction-led, more steel, more cement and so on.
But sir, I'm particularly intrigued to know about the website you mentioned. It will be about the Central Vista, the plans?
It will be about the entire Central Vista, the projects, what is the details, what are the decisions taken. And it is not as if somebody wrote a thesis and then closed the chapter. We are improvising as we go along. I mean, the fact that the plan is to extend the Central Vista from the current 2.9 kilometers to 6 kilometers plus, from Rashtrapati Bhavan on the one side to the riverfront on the other. All this, once it comes into the public domain, and how the intention is not only to build more efficient, energy efficient, environmentally sustainable structures, but to open the space up to the citizens of the country. I mean, North and South Block. I mean, I first entered South Block when I joined the Foreign Service in 1974. But, it's not open to the public. You may have work, you go there. But we would convert it into space where the common citizen can go and enter, whether it is to see an exhibition on India up to 1857 or India post 1857. These are remarkable game changers in terms of citizen participation. This is a project by a democratically elected government for the people of India, for posterity. So this criticism which comes, it's not serious. And the other thing is that I have always maintained that if you push a silly line beyond what are acceptable limits, then you are yourself writing out your own political irrelevance when that comes.
All right, sir. Beyond the political rhetoric and focusing on the new parliament building, what are the new features that one should look for specifically from the prism of technology? And what about the current building? Will it just be a museum or other uses as well?
The second part of your question is very easy, and so is the first part. So let me attempt the first and second one. The current building is in an advanced stage of disrepair. I mean, your channel knows it better than most. There is plaster falling off, light vents, have been closed, seating has been there. The building is under strain. So you need to, and it's now in seismic zone 4, so you have to be careful. So as soon as the new building is ready, we will undertake a very comprehensive revamp and regutting of the existing building. Now you can utilize the existing building, the older one, for a number of purposes. The Honorable Speaker has some ideas, these have been discussed, but ultimately the presiding officers will decide whether you want to have an Institute of Parliamentary Studies there, you want to have democracy, seminars there, you want to give more space to people. The new building will be refreshingly different. Just now, if you see the seating for honorable members, they can barely squeeze into the amount of it. No MP has a room of his own. I mean, one of the jokes around is, why do people gather in the central hall when Parliament is in session? The honest answer is they have nowhere else to go. Now, if I wanted to meet members of the press, where would I meet them? I would meet them in the central hall. But on the other hand, if every minister has a little office of his own where he can sit, where the minister can have research staff, where he can have access to library facilities, there are lounges, using technology which is cutting edge, which is the best. And by that I mean both the acoustic system, the voting system, the light coming into the building. There is enough artist impressions and other things outside. I hope you will utilize some of it when you put this on the air. But it is really state of the art.
All right, sir. We look forward to it. But do you think that there will be a constant comparison with Lutyens Delhi?
Meaning?
In terms of structure, in terms of design?
No, that's beautiful. I'll tell you, I was in a different profession. I've been to different world capitals. In one particular country, I saw the building, Parliament building, old one, completely different from the new one. So I asked a question. I was a young diplomat. Why is this? I said, well, this is the new country. And no, but in this case, there is both continuity of design, heritage, the architecture, its ethos, it's, the complete harmony there. And the people who are designing this went into considerable detail as to how the external facade will also, be in sync with the older building, and how the two together present a beautiful composite whole. And I think it's only a matter of time when you begin to see the, what I'm saying.
So you've also gone on record and said that the government will follow highest environmental standards. Now, one of the concerns that people are talking about is that of pollution, the kind of pollution that it will create, the construction will create. How do you assuage that concern?
one thing is clear, there is direction from the apex court also, from the Honorable Supreme Court, and any suggestion that we must have smoke towers which are integrated in the design of the new building, those instructions will be followed. Also instructions to the Ministry of Environment and Forest that for similar large projects in future, the same kind of precaution should be taken. All I can tell you is, even without the senior, apex courts, Honorable Supreme Court's suggestion, everyone who's involved in this had decided, and we will implement the highest standards in a very strict manner. Because this is a building which is going to be constructed in the heart of Delhi. So you have to take those precautions, because, you know, as it is, there are enough people trying to create a false narrative in terms of trying to derail the exercise. We will not only ensure that those standards are followed, but we will be communicating with the people and telling them what we are doing.
So I'll just shift focus a bit. And lastly, sir, vaccine rollout, as you said, we are ready for this massive drive. The role of your ministry, Civil Aviation Ministry, and how are you ensuring that it becomes seamless?
But first of all, vaccine rollout is being coordinated not by the Civil Aviation Ministry, rightly from the 4 major centers, the hubs, right down to last mile connectivity. The Civil Aviation Ministry feels very privileged that we are one part of that exercise, which means that all the stakeholders involved from the civil aviation family, which means the air carriers, which means the airports, they must be in a state of readiness. Now, I have been taking meetings, and I know the Chairman of the Airport Authority, the Secretary, and the coordinating mechanisms in the government, the Cabinet Secretary, Health Secretary, it's all absolutely there. They've done dry runs, and the latest information I see in the public domain, it's only a matter of days, maybe 10 days or so, maybe less, when the vaccine will be physically available and will be available for use according to priorities determined by the central government. So I think it's a remarkable story. Sometimes when I look back, when we went in for the lockdown, that if the Prime Minister had not taken the decision to go in for an early and an effective lockdown, we would not have had the wherewithal to create health infrastructure. We would not have been able to, save lives. We didn't manufacture PPE masks or ventilator, but we ended up utilizing our capacities in the spirit of Atmanirbharta also to end up becoming suppliers to the world. The hydroxychloroquine which was supplied, all the other things which are supplied. And today, when I see statements by Mr. Bill Gates to compliment the Prime Minister of India for India, it stands out as a remarkable success story that India has shown to the world how a developing country with a scientific pool, with a pool of scientists, health specialists, ICMR, the whole range, is a showcase. Now, we are only starting with 2 of the vaccines which are produced in India, but there's more coming.
All right, sir. On that optimistic note, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.